Are you ready?
Yes. No. Final entropy isn't yet complete. I can sense a few last living particles here and there. There are 2 left in the Andromeda Galaxy, each terrified of leaving the other alone.
We have little time before the universe dies. What troubles you?
For one thing, we've known each other for billions of years. I'll miss you. You're not afraid to die?
It is my purpose. My energies are all that remain to create the next universe. Your new home.
After I move on, I'll still have my memories, won't I? Sorry, you don't know for sure, I get that. But if it's all forgotten, then how did any of it matter in the end? I want the history of this universe to have meant something. It's important to me. Before I go, help me remember.
Remember what?
Everything.
Very well. Your universe was created from the eruption of another dying reality. It was into this new existence that I, its sole human survivor, Galen of Ta, emerged. Without shape, without form. With that eruption came echoes of energies, echoes of consciousnesses, which coalesced into the cosmic beings embodying the sentience of this universe suborning. Many of these abstracts eternity, Master Order, Lord Chaos, and Death joined the multiversal living tribunal to watch as I entered my cosmic crucible, where I began the long process of transforming into something more than mortal. Birthed, too, from the maelstrom of creation were 6 stones of unspeakable power. They would come to be known as the Infinity Gems. Meanwhile, the building blocks of this universe began to coalesce into stars and planets. From my previous home, other vestiges remained. One was known as the Phoenix Force, a manifestation of the prime universal force of life. Matter gathered beneath the other, the Emkron crystal, forming the universe's first planet. Across the cosmos, life began to develop, the Akanti among the first. The Akanti were the first curious sentients, passive beings roaming intergalactic space in pursuit of knowledge. The Celestials were more aggressive. They chose the role of influencers, and their impact would be felt time and again as they began seeding and manipulating life throughout the galaxy. The earliest species of their creation were short-lived, but did not die in the traditional sense. The last of each, the self-named Elders of the Universe, drew upon the waning life energies of their people to create a shared power primordial. This gave the Elders virtual immortality, allowing their races to live on in spirit. Eternity begat Eon, an other-dimensional master of quantum energy who was tasked with appointing protectors of the universe. Among the oldest species in existence was that of the Watchers of the planet T-37X. At first eager to share their incalculable wisdom with a younger civilization, they looked on as their immature recipients twisted their knowledge into weapons of war, destroying themselves. Consequently, the Watchers made a solemn vow to never again interfere with life in any form. A dark galaxy spawned the insectoid race called the Brood, the universe's first natural predators. They began intergalactic conquest by enslaving the Akanti before infesting neighboring star systems and building a fearsome empire. Meanwhile, I emerged from my incubator as the being I am today, Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. traveling in my world ship, Ta-2, I sought to quell my insatiable appetite for energy. Around an otherwise unremarkable yellow star, the Earth formed. Among its first living beings were the elder gods, Gaia, the mother of Earth, Ashtur, giver of light and justice, Set, the great destroyer, and Chthon, the mystic of dark magic, whose spells would survive for eons on indestructible scrolls. Yggdrasil, the world tree, sprouted, an energy field that supported and connected adjoining dimensions. Yggdrasil was instrumental in the creation of the Asgardian gods, whose civilization would routinely be obliterated and rebuilt in a cycle called Ragnarok. Demons strode the young earth, primary among them, the Beast, bringer of nihilism. Though his influence was at first minimal, it would one day manifest in a most vicious manner. The celestial known as a progenitor crash-landed on Earth as a result of a sentient infection known as the Horde. After dying beneath the Arctic ice, it would become known as Celestial Zero. Elsewhere in the Andromeda Galaxy, the Celestials performed genetic experiments on a reptilian race, creating the shape-shifting Skrulls, whose warlike nature would eventually threaten the Earth time and again. Another strain of aliens, the Nuwali, used advanced science to create a game preserve in Earth's Antarctic region. It was stocked with earthly life of the time, including early dinosaurs. Though Earth's fauna and flora would transform greatly over the next hundreds of millennia, this secret savage land would remain unevolved. Across the cosmos on the planet Chandalar, an avian-descended humanoid race called the Shi'ar embraced the art of war. Eventually, they would command the largest empire in the known universe. On the planet Halar, in the large Magellanic Cloud, an eons-old race called the Progenitors experimented on the primitive Kree, creating blue-skinned, purebred Kree and a larger tribe of pale-skinned savages who were later visited by the Skrulls. The Skrulls offered the pale Kree technology in exchange for planetary resources, testing their mettle by having them build an outpost on Earth's moon. This blue area would long go uninhabited after the Kree turned on the Skrulls, sparking a war between their worlds that would last for millennia. In the Andromeda Galaxy, the planet Xandar, wary of the Shi'ar and other empires, created its defense with the universe's first space militia, the Nova Corps, overseen by the World Mind, a sentient supercomputer containing the accumulated knowledge of all Xandar. The Celestials, intrigued by the malleability of the human race, sent the first host to perform genetic experiments that yielded the advanced Eternals and the grotesque Deviants. The Eternals, led by Kronos, secluded themselves in order to secretly protect Earth with their newfound abilities, while the brutish Deviants established an empire in the kingdom of Lemuria. The rest of the planet was not without its native protectors, however. An Asgardian god named Odin, nearing the end of his most recent life cycle, would travel to Earth to join Agamotto, Black Panther, Ghost Rider, Iron Fist, Lady Phoenix, and Starbrand. Together, they would be the first Avengers. Other races became aware of the genetic potential invested in the various species by the Celestials. The Kree mutated various races across the universe to serve as soldiers, One such group, drawn from the human race and known as the Inhumans, made their home in the island city of Atalan. Tuk, the first offspring of the Inhumans, lived among the mortals. His unique genetic code, passed down through generations, increased ordinary human susceptibility to mutation. The Plodex sent an unattended bioship to Earth to begin their own experiments. The lone human who discovered the ship, Eshu, became its test subject for forced evolution. The 30,000-year process was agonizing and resulted in Eshu having to create his own genetically perfect body. Thereafter, he referred to himself as the master of the world. Humans discovered Thorn's long-lost scrolls and used them to create Varney, the first vampire. Shortly thereafter, the Celestials appeared once again, their second host having judged the deviants as failures. The Celestials created a great cataclysm massive enough that it not only sank Lemuria beneath the waves, but also plunged the continent of Atlantis to the ocean's floor. A mere fraction of their inhabitants survived, after adapting their bodies to life under the sea as water breathers. Elsewhere, mortal civilizations began to recognize a new generation of gods: Anunnaki, Egyptian, Olympian, and more. The Asgardians, worshipped by the Norse, emerged from their most recent Ragnarok cycle, reborn. Mysticism on Earth flourished as Agamotto, after many millennia, passed on his title of Sorcerer Supreme to another. Immortality manifested twice in relatively short order. In Central Europe, with a superhuman named Celine Gallio, one of Earth's first mutants. And 7,000 years later in Scandinavia, where a hunter tried to save his tribe from a fragment of unearthly crystal by absorbing it into his chest, becoming Ulysses' bloodstone. Thousands of years after it sank, the ruins of Atlantis were rebuilt by the descendants of the original water breathers, creating a vast kingdom for their people. In order to escape discovery by the growing human race, the Inhumans relocated their city to the Himalayas, terming it the Great Refuge. Some were further elevated with the mutagenic Terrigen mists, which visited them with great powers. With few Inhumans willing to perform manual labor, an artificial servant caste called the Alpha Primitives was created to serve them. When a giant meteor smashed into the jungles of the African nation of Wakanda, Earth was saved from an extinction event due only to the meteor's ability to absorb all vibration. Named Vibranium by the Wakandans, it would, in the centuries ahead, become one of the planet's most valuable resources. Upon Kronos' passing, his sons Zuras and Alaz created the Unimind, a brain-like organism comprising the psionic and cosmic energies of their people. To avoid disunity, Zuras and Alaz divided the task of leadership. Zuras remained with his subjects on Earth, while Alaz settled on Saturn's moon, Titan, fathering a race of Titanian Eternals and adopting a new name, Mentor. As the Titanians flourished to Mentor and Suisan, two children were born, the carefree Eros and the grotesque Thanos, who would later become a universal menace of singular power and vision. In a remote region of China, a shapeshifter from the planet Kakarana Thora arrived in the form of a mighty dragon. He slumbered for centuries, awakening periodically to plague mankind. The Chinese named him Fin Fang Foom, he whose limbs shatter mountains and whose back scrapes the sun. Egypt became the next pivotal locale in human development, as a scientist, frustrated by his era's complacency, visited from the 31st century, became the ruler Rama Tut. He would later play several key roles in Earth history under numerous guises. He was eventually succeeded by En-Saba-Nur, the mutant who helped Imhotep repel a Brood invasion before eventually embracing a new identity as the tyrannical Apocalypse. Imhotep subsequently banded together Earth's greatest thinkers to form the Brotherhood of the Shield. Later, under the reign of Ramses II, a court wizard named Aneth-Namut happened upon a temple of unknown origin. Inside, the mystical Ka Stone imbued him with vast superhuman powers and immortality. As the Sphinx, he eventually ascended to cosmic status. Secret organizations began to take shape around the world. The mystical martial arts enclave known as the Chaste was founded to combat the ninja clan called the Hand, worshippers of the ancient beast. Seeking to father a son whose power would be derived both from Asgard and Earth, Odin mated with Gaia to give birth to Thor, Odin's son. In Rome, former Emperor Romulus Augustulus, also known as Tyrannus, was kept vital by the Fountain of Youth. He discovered a class of former deviant slaves and claimed rule over their realm, Subterranea. When the Celestials' impending childbirth threatened Earth, Zheng Heng of the Brotherhood of the Shield arranged for it to give birth in the sun instead. In England, Arthur Pendragon founded the fabled Kingdom of Camelot with the help of Earth's newest sorcerer supreme, Merlin. The two men were frequently opposed by Arthur's half-sister, Morgan Le Fay, whose magics rivaled Merlin's own when she collected Chthon's scrolls into the tome called the Darkhold. One of Camelot's greatest champions was Sir Percy of Scandia as the Black Knight. Percy wielded the Ebony Blade, a mystic sword crafted by Merlin from a fallen meteorite called the Starstone, which could deflect magic and cut through nearly any substance. Centuries later, in Europe, a nobleman named Esteban Corazon d'Ablo promised his soul to the demon Mephisto in exchange for the secrets of alchemy. Using his newfound skills, Diablo drew from the blood of vampires to create the elixir vitae, key to immortality. When Earth was visited by the third host of Celestials, the godlike giants unintentionally garnered the worship of some of humanity, drawing power away from Earth's pantheons. Confronted by representatives of the Council of Godheads, Odin, Zeus, and Vishnu, the third host negotiated a 1,000-year truce of non-interference. To prepare for the Celestials' eventual fourth host, which would judge humanity, Odin created the Destroyer, an invincible suit of armor imbued with the power of the Council of Godheads. In Asia, the Mongol Empire evolved into the secret society known as the Atlas Foundation. Each Atlas leader, bent on world domination, was a descendant and rightful heir to Genghis Khan, whose bloodline continued into the 21st century. Diablo was not the only alchemist to trade with demons. In Italy, the sorcerer Belasco attempted to enable the Mabdara demons to cross into our dimension, in return gaining great magical power and near invulnerability and immortality. but cursed with a demonic appearance. In the mystic city of Kamartaj, in the area now known as Tibet, two men, Yao and Kalu, explored the secrets of sorcery. In time, Kalu turned on his people, and Yao barely managed to defeat him. Yao thereafter dedicated his life to the study of magic, ultimately becoming Earth's sorcerer supreme. Eternity granted him the all-seeing artifact called the Eye of Agamotto, and Yao eventually became known as the Ancient One. Prince Vlad Dracula of Transylvania paid for his ruthless persecution of the Turkish people when a Romani woman transformed him into a vampire. This did nothing to abate his violent nature. In time, Dracula enhanced his own blood with that of Varney, giving him far greater powers than any other vampire. Galaxies away, having turned to inhabited worlds to consume, I was openly defied for the first time by a brave soul, Norin Rad of the planet Zenla. In exchange for sparing Zenla, Rad agreed to leave forever and serve as my herald, seeking out other worlds to sustain me. Imbuing him with a small fraction of my power cosmic, I transformed Rad into the Silver Surfer. Begun in England as an elite social group, the Hellfire Club progressed into a worldwide organization that wielded vast political and economic influence in America. Following the Revolutionary War, the first Inner Circle members were assigned the titles of chess pieces, its leaders kings and queens. Originally a purely human group, the Hellfire Club was slowly infiltrated and conquered by various superpowered mutants. After Londoner Nathaniel Essex lost his young son to birth defects, he dedicated his life to biological and genetic experimentation in hopes of perfecting the human race's evolution. Essex's mentor, Apocalypse, used mutant genetic material to evolve Essex into superhuman form. He adopted the new name, Mr. Sinister. In young America, lawlessness swept across the western frontiers, a number of gunslingers. Among them, Kid Colt, the Rawhide Kid, the Two-Gun Kid, and the Ghost Rider took up the challenge of protecting the weak and innocent. North, in Alberta, Canada, the wealthy John and Elizabeth Howlett parented a son. The frail boy, James Howlett, was unaware that his true father was their abusive groundskeeper, Thomas Logan. Despite his weak and timid childhood, James would grow up to become fierce and strong beyond imagining. Mutants, born with an X gene that gives them superhuman powers, began to appear with increasing frequency. Two mutants, an Austrian precognitive named Irene Adler and the shape-shifting Raven Darkholm, embarked upon a quest for wealth and influence under the names Destiny and Mystique. In London, a mysterious band of human soldiers with strange high-tech weapons came together to repel a Martian invasion. One survivor, Eben Stafford, dedicated his life to defending the Earth, referring to himself as the Man on the Wall. Stafford would pass the role to others in years to come. Elsewhere, another legacy was continued when an English couple, the Randalls, inadvertently discovered the ancient mystic city of Kunlun during one of its periodic appearances on the earthly plane. Their son, Orson Randall, adopted the ways of Kunlun, defeated the dragon Shu Lao, and absorbed some of its power becoming the first Iron Fist of the modern age. Other heroes rose under the threat of the First World War, as Union Jack, James Montgomery Falsworth battled the Germans alongside the Crimson Cavalier, Sir Steel and the Silver Squire, and the Phantom Eagle, Freedom's Five. Iron Fist would later join their ranks. Behind enemy lines, America's first super soldier, John Steele, was captured and placed in stasis so that German scientists, among them the conscripted Jewish doctor Abraham Erskine, might study his incredible physical prowess. A chance meeting between Sea Captain Leonard Mackenzie and Princess Fen of Atlantis led to romance, marriage, and the birth of the hybrid human Atlantean child, Namor. On the Lower East Side of New York, a sickly child named Steve Rogers was born on Independence Day, a date foreshadowing the journey upon which his innate courage and hatred of bullies would later take him. Vampire Deacon Frost feasted on a pregnant woman, infusing her child with the enzymes that transformed Eric Brooks into the half-human, half-vampire Blade. Inspired by the work of Nathaniel Essex, geneticist Herbert Wyndham established a lab in Transia on Wendigo Mountain. A self-described visionary, Wyndham crowned himself the High Evolutionary, creating a new civilization by transforming animals into human forms he called New Men. Adventurers and vigilantes continued to join forces. Iron Fist led the short-lived Confederates of the Curious against supernatural threats, while the East Coast-based Mystery Men battled conspiracy and mystic evil. In California, a thrill-seeker calling himself Dominic Fortune took aim against those who would imperil America. In New York, Dr. Tom Holloway was inspired by the Two-Gun Kid, now an elderly patient under his care, to take up the cause of heroism as the Angel. Everywhere, an undercurrent of heroism was smoldering. Soon, it would burst into a red-hot flame. In 1939, scientist Phineas Horton created the first artificial man. Unsuccessfully, he believed, as it turned ablaze whenever exposed to oxygen. Eventually, Horton's android learned to control the fire generated by his android body and became known as the heroic Human Torch. In Tibet, searching for an heir to his title, the Ancient One counseled two pupils. One, Baron Karl Mordo, was unable to shed the darkness in his heart, and would, in time, become one of Earth's most sinister sorcerers. The other, Anthony Ludgate, went on to use his magic to combat evil as Dr. Druid. The temperamental Prince Namor, taught by his elders to distrust surface dwellers and prepare to invade the cities, attempted a reconnaissance mission in New York, only to run afoul of paranoia and fear from those who referred to him as the freakish Submariner. Enraged, he attacked the city and was rebuffed by the Human Torch, the first meeting of this new breed of champions known as superheroes. Over time, the Torch was able to form a tenuous friendship with Namor and convince him to spare the surface world his wrath. Their pact would not last. Not long after, however, the Torch found a true companion, the orphan Tom Raymond, child of two of Professor Horton's assistants. Through a combination of mutated genetics and exposure to Horton's experiments, the boy, nicknamed Toro, could emulate the Torch's abilities. On September 1st, 1939, the German army invaded Poland, sparking World War II. Among his underlings, Führer Adolf Hitler relied particularly heavily on the merciless Johann Schmidt, whom Hitler himself had trained in the ways of the Nazis. Under the grotesque identity of the Red Skull, Schmidt began a reign of terror in Europe. Though not yet officially engaged in the war, the American military nonetheless sought to create a symbol of national strength. Dr. Erskine of Germany, who had defected to the U.S., spearheaded Operation Rebirth, turning frail volunteer Steve Rogers into a superhuman fighting machine. Assigned the codename Captain America, Rogers protected the home front alongside the orphan James Buchanan Bucky Barnes. Rogers battled Nazi 5th columnists valiantly, but he yearned to take the fight to the front lines. In December of 1941, he got his chance. The attack on Pearl Harbor spurred President Franklin D. Roosevelt to declare America an official member of the Allied forces. The country was at war. At the request of Roosevelt and the British Prime Minister Churchill, Captain America, Bucky, the Submariner, the Human Torch, and Toro joined forces as the invaders, the Allies' first line of attack. Others, such as the Whizzer, Miss America, Spitfire, and the son of the original Union Jack, gradually joined their ranks. Meanwhile, the home front was defended by an explosion of new, patriotically motivated crime fighters. Among them, Arcus the Vision, the Thin Man, Red Raven, Blue Diamond, and Jack Frost. Elsewhere overseas, Sergeant Nick Fury and his elite band of soldiers, the Howling Commandos, became legends as they struck fear in the hearts of the Axis powers. Moving up and down the Western Front, the Commandos liberated towns and concentration camps alike. Tragically, they never encountered the camp that held a young mutant named Max Eisenhardt. Had they freed the boy, allowing him to channel his magnetic powers under their guidance, all of history might have taken a different turn. Erskine, killed by the Nazis, took the secrets of his super soldier serum to the grave. Both America and the Axis attempted to recreate it, but only had partial success, with some subjects, including the African-American Isaiah Bradley and the Nazi Masterman. In late April 1945, near the end of World War II, Captain America and Bucky prevented Nazi officer Baron Heinrich Zemo from successfully using an explosive drone against the Allies. Triggered by Bucky before the plane could reach Allied shores, the bomb exploded, hurling both men into the icy waters of the North Atlantic. The Soviets recovered Bucky, badly wounded and missing memories. Steve Rogers, preserved in suspended animation by the super soldier serum, would remain lost for decades to come. Both Captain America and the Red Skull were believed dead, but they would have successors. First, the Spirit of 76, and later, the Patriot, continued Rogers' legacy, while Soviet operative Albert Malik donned the mask of the Red Skull. And though the Human Torch was able to bring an end to the tyranny of Adolf Hitler, Germany's Baron Strucker combined the Nazis' more inhumane philosophies with his own, creating the organization known as Hydra. At the close of the war, the invaders transitioned into the peacetime All-Winners Squad, while the destroyer, Union Jack, and Spitfire banded together to hunt down surviving Nazis and other war criminals. Eventually, this group would join others in becoming the V Battalion. The war had ended, but hostilities had not. America engaged Communist Russia in a Cold War, fought not with open conflict, but with espionage. The Soviets turned a brainwashed Bucky Barnes into one of their most effective and least seen operatives, the Winter Soldier. Stateside, groomed by a colony of Eternals, Bob Grayson used Uranian weapons to battle the Communists as Marvel Boy. Marine Adam Brashear did the same as the Blue Marvel. New heroes were needed as the old ones continued to disappear. William Burnside and Jack Monroe claimed the roles of Captain America and Bucky after taking a flawed version of the original super soldier serum. Though they became a symbol of patriotism after the Korean War, the serum slowly turned them mentally unstable and destructive. With no cure at hand, the government placed them in cryogenic deep freeze. The Human Torch, victim of the lingering radiation of an atomic bomb, burned himself out beneath the Nevada desert. The Submariner's memories were erased by the villainous Paul Destine, who left Namor wandering New York City as a homeless beggar. Nick Fury remained vital thanks to a unique infinity formula that slowed his aging substantially. As a CIA agent, Fury fought for his country. As the next to become the man on the wall, he fought for his planet. At the height of the Cold War, FBI agent Jimmy Woo assembled a Department Zero of heroes: Gorilla Man, Venus, Marvel Boy, Namora, and the Human Robot, to battle the most recent head of the Atlas Empire, Plan Chu, the Golden Claw. The High Evolutionaries' forces repelled a mystic invasion by Chthon, but not before the Elder God was able to mark an infant girl named Wanda Maximoff as his future vessel. Other teams rose to fight menaces both domestic and otherworldly. Ulysses Bloodstone, Dr. Druid, Makari, Namora, and Zawadi called themselves the Monster Hunters. The Yankee Clipper, Black Fox, Liberty Girl, and Nightingale were the first line, defending Earth from Skrulls and other threats. Nick Fury brought together Kraven the Hunter, Sabretooth, Silver Sable, Dominic Fortune, and others under the directive entitled The Avengers Initiative. All of a sudden waves of extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional threats created panic. Notable among them was a towering representative of the extraterrestrial race, Flora Colossi, who came to Earth to aggressively collect information about its inhabitants. Calling itself Groot, its ability to control plant life nearly destroyed a town before it was stopped. Dr. Stephen Strange, the most prized of the Ancient One's students, set up residence at 177A Bleecker Street in New York's Greenwich Village. At first dealing with minor magical menaces, he would soon be introduced to mysteries of the cosmos previously unseen by mortal humans. Andre Thornton, better known as the Professor, used Mr. Sinister's abandoned work to attempt to create super weapon warriors of his own. Weapon Plus yielded a group of Black Ops soldiers called Team X. Preeminent among them was a bone-clawed mutant with healing abilities, the Canadian James Howlett, known now as Logan, or Wolverine. Logan, Silver Fox, Maverick, and others worked in secret, both for the Weapon Plus program and for the CIA. Leaving government service after accidentally shooting a fellow agent, Logan was captured by an offshoot group, Weapon X. In an attempt to remake him as a living weapon, they infused his skeleton, including his claws, with the indestructible metal known as adamantium. Reduced to a near-lifeless state, Logan broke free of his reprogramming, destroyed his tormentors, and wandered into the Canadian Rockies. He would soon be recruited into Canada's superhuman-oriented Department H. The second Red Skull engineered the fatal plane crash of two CIA operatives, Richard and Mary Parker, shortly after the child Peter was born. The child, adopted by Richard's brother and sister-in-law, will grow up to become one of Earth's most valiant champions of justice. A United Nations affiliated group spurred the next incarnation of the Brotherhood of the Shield as a countermeasure against the rising evil of Hydra. Nick Fury was appointed the head of the Supreme Headquarters, International Espionage Law Enforcement Division, or SHIELD. In Los Angeles, the Gibberim, requiring mortal acolytes to serve them on Earth, promised wealth, power and influence to their potential servants if they could prove their worth. Vowing to pass this reward to the children, a group known as the Pride demonstrated their value by becoming the covert rulers of the city's criminal empire. When the Asian nation of Hong Kong resisted the communist takeover, the conflict turned international. Nations both from the West and the East entered the decade-long Sian Kong War, in times struggling to lay first claim to Sian Kong's primary asset, mysterious energy known only as the Dragon's Breath, around which cults and legends had grown. Asian crime barons, the Mandarin and Lady Lotus, manipulated much of the conflict, as did the warlord Wang Chu. It was in Sian Kong that Marines James Rhodes and Frank Castle, Army Air Force pilot Ben Grimm, and military consultant Reed Richards, and many others who would later become key figures in history, first fought in service of their country. Odin, exasperated by Thor's arrogance, exiled him to Earth in the mortal guise of a disabled young medical student named Donald Blake, the memory of his true identity stripped from him. As Blake, Thor learned the value of humility and empathy as a healer and surgeon. At State University in New York, 3 students, Richard Grimm and Reed's arrogant counterpart, Victor Von Doom, would meet for the first time, unaware how fate would soon entwine their lives. The stage was set for the Age of Heroes. On an ill-fated space mission, 4 astronauts, Ben Grimm, Reed Richards, Reed's fiancée Susan Storm, and her brother Johnny, were bombarded by cosmic rays far too powerful for the shields on Richard's ship to withstand. Their bodies changed drastically, giving them superhuman powers and abilities. Richards, guilty over how he'd altered his friends' lives, refused to let them be feared by the world as freaks. Instead, he turned them into a group of superheroes in colorful costumes who embraced a life of celebrity and glamour. Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. Susan Storm, the Invisible Girl. Ben Grimm, the Thing. Together, they heralded a new age of heroes as the Fantastic Four. On a southwestern test site, nuclear physicist Bruce Banner was caught in the explosion of his gamma bomb. As the radiation settled in his system, Banner's body would respond to stress by transforming into the Hulk, a raging behemoth whose level of intelligence was continually in flux, but whose strength followed one rule: the madder Hulk got, the stronger he got. In New York, Johnny Storm discovered and reawakened Namor, who had been wandering the Earth in an amnesiac state following an attack by an old enemy of his father's. Namor, suffering from a chemical imbalance after years as a land dweller, was no longer an American ally. Reuniting with the Atlantean race, he once again declared an ongoing war on the surface world. Blaming his former college colleague for an accident that scarred his face, Victor Von Doom swore vengeance on Richard's Fantastic Four. His high-tech armor with its state-of-the-art defenses quickly made him their most formidable foe, Dr. Doom. Like Namor, Doom was the ruler of his own kingdom, Latveria, a small Balkan nation. Granted diplomatic immunity by his throne, Doom used Latveria as a base from which to launch repeated attempts to conquer the world. After an accident in which eccentric scientist Hank Pym exposed himself to his own shrinking potion, he was inspired to make use of his size-changing experiments by combining his Pym particles with a helmet that allowed him to communicate with ants. He became known as Ant-Man. Back in New York City, a shy teenager named Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider. Imbued with the proportionate strength and speed of a spider, as well as the ability to climb walls, Parker created mechanical web shooters and launched a show business career as Spider-Man. Though Spider-Man was initially self-centered and egotistical, his apathy towards others would not last, carelessly allowing a burglar to escape. A burglar who would go on to murder Peter's beloved Uncle Ben. Taught Parker the hard lesson that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. From that day forward, Spider-Man fought selflessly to defend others from crime and violence. On vacation in Norway, Dr. Donald Blake came across his lost hammer, Mjolnir. His godhood rekindled, the mighty Thor nevertheless counted Earth, his beloved Midgard, as his home, away from the celestial spires of Asgard. Tony Stark, a wealthy industrialist and engineer, was captured by enemy forces in Asia after his heart was wounded by a landmine during a terrorist attack. A fellow prisoner, Hoy Yinsen, helped Stark create a suit of armor that would protect his vulnerable heart. In the resultant escape attempt, Yinsen was killed. Stark made his way back to America, improved the armor with a continual series of modifications, and took up the cause of righteousness as Iron Man. The Watcher, tasked with monitoring the Earth, revealed himself to the Fantastic Four during their battle with the Red Ghost and his super-powered apes. Residing in the long-abandoned Kree lunar outpost known as the Blue Area, Uatu found himself moved by the nobility of the human race. He began to ignore his vowed non-interference, appearing frequently to warn Earth's heroes of sufficiently threatening crises. Heiress Janet Van Dyne's flighty nature went from figurative to literal when Ant-Man offered to help her bring her father's killer to justice. Subjected to a unique biochemical process combined with PIM particles, Van Dyne gained wings whenever she shrank to insect size. Outfitted with wrist blast stingers, she fought alongside Pym as the Wasp. The romantic spark between the two of them would grow, and soon so would Pym himself, reversing his shrinking process to become the thunderous Giant Man. Thor's sinister adopted brother, the god of mischief, Loki, inadvertently brought many of Earth's new heroes together as they joined forces to defeat his evil. Though the Hulk would leave their ranks almost immediately, the others established the Tony Stark-funded team known as the Avengers, public heroes. They were greeted with wide acceptance. Mutant Charles Xavier's charges were not so fortunate. For years, the telepathic Xavier had been recruiting young mutants to his school in Westchester, New York, training them in the use of their powers. 5 of them, Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, Angel, and Marvel Girl, formed Xavier's first team of X-Men. Though they fought evil and mayhem as bravely as the Avengers, mutants were nonetheless feared and hated by the general populace, forcing the X-Men to operate largely outside the limelight. In the years following World War II, mutant Max Eisenhardt's bitterness toward the human race reached a crescendo. Like his old friend Xavier, Eisenhardt gathered mutants under his wing, but only those who shared his mistrust of humanity. Taking the name Magneto, his brotherhood became the X-Men's greatest nemesis. Originally comprising Mastermind, the Toad, Quicksilver, and the Scarlet Witch, Magneto's brotherhood would later claim dozens of corrupt mutants as members. Lost for decades in suspended animation, Captain America's frozen body was discovered and revived by the Avengers. Though the shock of awakening decades into his future was profound, and though he mourned Bucky, Steve Rogers adapted quickly to his new surroundings and proved himself as formidable as ever as an Avenger. Spilled radioactive waste blinded young Matt Murdock, but it enhanced his remaining senses 1,000-fold and gave him an echolocation, like radar sense, that helped compensate for his lack of sight. After his father, a boxer, was murdered for refusing to throw the fight, the adult Murdoch chose to serve justice not only in a courtroom as an accomplished lawyer, but as Daredevil, the man without fear. During a rampage through Manhattan, the Hulk encountered the Fantastic Four, leading to the first extended battle between the Thing and the Hulk. The heroism demonstrated by the Fantastic Four reminded the Avengers that they weren't Earth's only line of defense against titanic menaces. For the first time, Iron Man and his teammates felt they could turn their full attention back to their own lives. But when they put out a call for replacements, nothing could have prepared them for the applicants. The Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, freshly divorced from Magneto's influence, and Hawkeye, a trick-arrow marksman and reformed criminal. It took every bit of diplomacy and willpower Captain America could muster to keep such a disparate group together. But they in time proved themselves to be worthy successors. More and more, the champions and the villains of this new age began to encounter one another in battle, culminating at the wedding of Reed Richards and Sue Storm. The wedding was both attended and successfully defended by all of Earth's prominent heroes as they fought off an assembled legion of enemies dispatched by Dr. Doom. Your parents traveled around the world forming new alliances. In the Himalayas they met the Inhumans, led by Black Bolt, whose voice had the power to level mountains. In Wakanda, they encountered T'Challa, the Black Panther. And in New York, they faced their defining challenge when Silver Surfer brought me to your planet for the first time. Infected by human compassion, the Surfer betrayed me, assisting Richard and his teammates in forcing me to turn my attentions away from devouring Earth for a time. As punishment for his treachery, I temporarily confined the Surfer to Earth, denying him the ability to soar the spaceways. Eventually, properly chastised, he would again serve at my command. The original Red Skull, awakened from suspended animation by the terrorist organization AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics, briefly held the reality-changing weapon known as the Cosmic Cube, before having it wrested away in battle with Captain America. Under the newly assumed identity of Yellow Jacket, Hank Pym wed Janet Van Dyne. Meanwhile, the Kree turned their attention to Earth once more. A highly trained Kree soldier, Mar-Vell, was dispatched to spy on the human race. Caught in a power struggle among his kind, Captain Mar-Vell resigned from service and cast aside his military uniform in favor of a look designed by the Kree's own supreme intelligence. Mar-Vell's independence, however, was short-lived. Once an accident plunged him into the antimatter continuum that Reed Richards, its first human explorer, named the Negative Zone. Richards was no stranger to this harsh realm. He knew of its dangers, but he also knew that his wife, pregnant with their first child, was dying from a radiation poisoning, curable only with a device from the zone. He and his friends braved the threats therein, including the mad tyrant Annihilus, in order to save Susan Richards and their child. You.
I thought you'd never get around to me.
Yours is a complex history unto its own, Franklin Richards, the most powerful mutant ever born. As I consume, so do you build.
Did build. Not at first. That much I recall. But eventually, worlds. Then, as I grew older, multiverses. A few centuries after that, I really let my imagination run wild, didn't I? We're the balance of the universe, really, you and I. The utmost creator, the ultimate destroyer. Would I even have been born had you not existed? Have you been incessantly resurrected because I was around? Do we need each other? You're coming with me, right? When we leave here. Galen?
The 21st century, as you measure it, marched onward. Earthman Rick Jones, once the Hulk's companion and briefly Captain America's fighting partner, became a key player in human history as the Kree's eternal struggle with the Skrulls reached its climax by striking the Negabands. Jones could trade places with Mar-Vell for short periods, but it was Jones himself, alongside the Avengers, who ended the Kree-Skrull War once the supreme intelligence sparked within him. For a brief but critical moment, the Destiny Force, a mysterious and nearly limitless energy that bested both armies. Concurrently, Destiny in another form was at work on Earth, repeatedly bringing together the Hulk, Doctor Strange, the Submariner, and soon, the Silver Surfer, to fight threats both mystical and mechanical. Working well together, they formed a loose confederation of champions such as Valkyrie, calling themselves the Defenders. It was not the only group that claimed Stephen Strange and Namor as members. In the aftermath of the Kree-Skrull War, fearing further incursions from alien races, Iron Man convened a secret council of friends and acquaintances: Doctor Strange, the Submariner, Black Bolt, Reed Richards, Professor Xavier, and briefly, the Black Panther. Referring to themselves as the Illuminati, they met periodically to exchange highly classified information critical to Earth's survival. Xavier, in fact, had given his blessing to his graduating students to explore new lives of their own. The first of his class to leave the school for gifted youngsters, Hank McCoy, later mutated further into a beast-like form that would evolve over the coming years. The others continued to operate undercover. Not all the menaces of the era were star-spanning. Hong Kong veteran Marine Frank Castle was forever traumatized by the death of his family at the hands of mobsters. Equipped with a state-of-the-art arsenal, Castle began waging a one-man war against crime as the Punisher. Stunt motorcyclist Johnny Blaze bargained with Hell's Mephisto to save the life of his adoptive father, thereafter bound to the demon Zarathos to dispense supernatural vengeance as the newest Ghost Rider. New York became home to a rapid influx of martial arts masters, among them Danny Rand, recent heir to the mantle of Iron Fist, and Shang-Chi, rebellious son of an international crime boss. Carl Lucas, imprisoned for a crime he did not commit, volunteered for experimental medical research. An electrochemical treatment endowed him with superhuman strength and durability. He used his newfound abilities to escape from prison, and under the name Luke Cage, established a career as a hero for hire. Scientist Ted Sallis, dosed with his own variation of the super soldier serum, tainted by the mystic waters of a Florida swamp, was transformed into the gruesome Man-Thing, whose touch burned those who felt fear in his presence. His adventures led to a meeting with a duck-like being known only as Howard, a transplant from another dimension. Teenager Jack Russell fell prey to a family curse that made him a werewolf by night. Biochemist Michael Morbius's self-treatment for a rare blood disease brought with it vampiric side effects. From a young age, Natasha Romanoff had been trained by the Russian Red Room to become a peerless assassin codenamed the Black Widow. After an encounter with Iron Man, however, she emancipated herself from her cruel masters and came to America. In San Francisco, she began a brief romance with Daredevil. Together, they encountered Moondragon, an Earthling who had been raised on Titan by Thanos' father, Mentor, after the Mad Titan's actions left her orphaned. A subsequent adventure introduced the two to Shanna O'Hara, an animal caregiver who had turned her back on the modern world in exchange for a life in the Savage Land. It was there that Shanna, in turn, encountered Kevin Plunder, a boy abandoned in the savage land who had grown to manhood under the name Khazar, son of the tiger. No stranger to tragedy, Spider-Man would face his greatest loss thus far when Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, kidnapped his girlfriend, Gwen Stacy. During their battle, Stacy fell from a great height, and Spider-Man's attempt to save her only accelerated her death. Though Spider-Man's thirst for vengeance accidentally led to his archenemy's apparent death, the young man found no comfort in victory. Nor was he aware that a college professor of his, Dr. Miles Warren, the devious jackal, had embarked on a far-reaching plot against Spider-Man that would eventually produce clones of both Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. Pitted against one another by Dormammu and Loki, the Avengers and the Defenders fought over a mystic artifact known only as the Evil Eye. Only upon joining forces were they able to thwart their enemy's goal of plunging Earth into the Dark Dimension. The Scarlet Witch wed her fellow Avenger, the synthezoid known as the Vision. Though their marriage would not last, their friendship would long endure. Avenger Mantis simultaneously bonded with a member of the Kotati race, who had taken the form of her late companion, the Swordsman. Disillusioned upon learning that the leader of the criminal organization called the Secret Empire was actually a high-placed government official, Captain America temporarily abandoned his patriotic identity and became the Nomad, bound to no country's politics. In Canada, engineer James MacDonald Hudson was inspired by the Fantastic Four to create his own team of superhumans, Alpha Flight. Among their earliest missions was a failed attempt to recapture Wolverine, an expatriate who had left Canada's Department H to join the X-Men. Wolverine's first battle with the Hulk had brought him to the attention of Professor Xavier. When the X-Men disappeared on a mission, Xavier recruited Wolverine, along with mutants Banshee, Colossus, Sunfire, Storm, Thunderbird, and Nightcrawler to rescue the original team. Under the leadership of Cyclops, they elected to stay together as the new X-Men. Soon after, teammate Jean Grey sacrificed herself to save her friends. In that moment, the Phoenix Force created a duplicate Jean, believed by all, including herself, to be the original. As Phoenix, she led the X-Men to their greatest triumph to date, the repair of the M'Kraan crystal, and the salvation of the endangered crystal heart of reality. All were astounded at the power of the Phoenix, unaware that their astonishment would soon turn into terror.
I don't really think of you as someone able to experience fear. Of my father, maybe, but there's something else. I'm surprised that a cosmic being of your station, an immortal, universal force who visited my world so infrequently, remembers, I don't know, Howard the Duck and Kid Colt. Were you paying that much attention to Earth the whole time?
No. Much of what I relate to you now is information gleaned from the planet T-37X.
So the Watchers told you all that? No, of course not. You learned it by consuming them. That's a trick you picked up late in the game. Makes sense, but no offense. Galen, do you want to stop? If we're going to enter the next universe together, you're going to need your strength.
Let me continue. The Phoenix Force, a cosmic energy now intertwined with the human consciousness and emotions, slowly surrendered to its destructive impulses. As Dark Phoenix, the false Jean Grey hosting it, began to exert incalculable power in malevolent ways. Her Jean Grey persona managed to subsume Dark Phoenix, but it would bring her no peace. Her corrupted self-subliteration of a distant inhabited star system and a Shi'ar battlecruiser caught the attention of the Shi'ar Empire and its princess, Lilandra, who vowed to make Phoenix pay for her act of genocide. In the ensuing combat, Phoenix once more felt herself losing control of her dark side. Rather than risk having Dark Phoenix claim lives, Phoenix committed suicide. Around the Earth, other heroes emerged. Teenager Richard Ryder was recruited by the Xandrian space militia, the Nova Corps. In exchange for his life, mercenary Mark Spector was beholden to the Egyptian god of the moon, Khonshu, becoming the Moon Knight. Similarly, at death's door, Brian Braddock was appointed to the role of Britain's protector and champion by the spirits of Merlin and his daughter Roma. Choosing the Amulet of Right over the Sword of Might, Braddock became Captain Britain. Singer Alison Blair, a mutant who could convert sound into light, began calling herself the Dazzler. Jessica Drew, who awoke from decades of suspended animation with spider-like powers imbued by her father, Jonathan, and the High Evolutionary took the name Spider-Woman. And Carol Danvers, child of a human father and an alien mother, began working under the name Miss Marvel, once her superhuman potential was unleashed by Kree technology. Chronic traveler Michael Korvac, searching for power, forced his way into a starship few had ever seen, my own. While aboard, he absorbed the power cosmic and became a godlike being bent on reshaping the Earth into his own personal utopia. His goal brought him to battle with the Avengers and fellow time travelers, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Earth's 31st century defenders. Korvac actually succeeded in murdering the Guardians and the Avengers both, only after his lover, Karina, daughter of the Elder of the Universe, the Collector, expressed shock over the violence he used did Korvac turn his power on himself, reviving the dead heroes in an act of nobility as his body went dormant and was believed dead. The fourth host of Celestials returned to pass final judgment on Earth's right to exist. Odin gathered Thor, the Eternals, and the combined life force of all Asgardians to battle them, only to be defeated. Ultimately, the Earth Mother, Gaia, was able to send the Celestials away after rendering to them a gift of 12 special human volunteers representing humanity's noblest achievements, thus proving Earth's worth. When his cousin, attorney Jennifer Walters, was gunned down in a mob-related shooting, Bruce Banner saved her life with a transfusion of his own gamma-irradiated blood. Similar to Banner, adrenaline often turned Walters into the mighty She-Hulk. Henry Pym began a tragic downward spiral as his mental illness flared. After a near-catastrophic judgment on the battlefield, the Avengers began court-martialing proceedings against Pym, sparking a nervous breakdown that caused him to lash out at his wife, Janet, after which she divorced him. It would be some time before Pym would be able to subdue his inner demons. With the Inhumans growing increasingly ill from man-made pollution, they relocated Atalan to the blue area of the moon. After being exposed to a canister of experimental nerve gas by the villain Nitro, not even the resilience and alien physiology of Captain Marvel could stave off a fatal cancer mutated by the photonic energy of his negabands. Charles Xavier reopened his school for gifted youngsters to a new generation of mutants. Early students included the super-strong Sunspot, the lupine Wolfsbane, the rocket-powered Cannonball, the illusion master Psyche, aka Mirage, and Karma, who could mentally possess others. Daredevil's first great love, the assassin Elektra Natchios, was murdered by his enemy Bullseye, though she was later resurrected by the Hand. New heroes adopted old identities. Former New Orleans Harbor Patrol Lieutenant Monica Rambeau acquired the ability to transform herself into electromagnetic energy and took the name Captain Marvel, later Spectrum. James Rhodes donned the Iron Man armor for the first time. Alien Beta Ray Bill proved worthy of the Hammer of Thor. In order to investigate the nature of desire, a sensation foreign to him, the near-omnipotent Beyonder assembled a great number of Earth's heroes and villains on a distant world and commanded them to fight to the death. The victor would be granted anything they wished. In the midst of this secret war, Victor Von Doom stole the Beyonder's power, but was ultimately defeated when his own paranoid subconscious enabled the Beyonder to reclaim it. On this battle world, Spider-Man had replaced his damaged costume with a black one made of a strange fabric responsive to his mental commands. Only later was he to learn that the fabric was, in fact, an alien symbiote who would eventually bond with disgraced reporter Eddie Brock and become known as Venom. Alex, Julie, Jack, and Katie Power were ordinary children granted superhuman powers by an alien defender. Despite the sometimes random nature of these abilities, they championed justice as Power Pack. The Avengers expanded their operations, forming a second team on the American West Coast. Homeless runaways Tyrone Johnson and Tandy Bowen became unwilling test subjects for a new drug, which inadvertently granted them power over darkness and light. As Cloak and Dagger, they declared war on drug crime and pledged to protect other young runaways like themselves. Jean Grey's dormant body was found by the Avengers and rejuvenated by Reed Richards. Eager to continue Professor X's mission of repairing the strain between humans and mutants, she gathered her original classmates, Cyclops, Beast, Iceman, and Angel, and together they created X-Factor. One of their earliest battles was against Mr. Sinister's Marauders, who attempted to eradicate the Morlocks, an underground mutant community. Though many other heroes joined X-Factor in opposing this mutant massacre, its consequence led to the transformation of the Angel into the savage Archangel, the near destruction of the X-Men, and countless mutants slain. Baron Zemo and his Masters of Evil laid siege to Avengers Mansion with an attack that nearly annihilated the team and destroyed their headquarters. There are some who say that the Avengers' eventual victory was perhaps their finest moment. When Tony Stark learned that his Iron Man technology had been reproduced and was being used by his enemies, he became obsessed with preventing his creations from harming others. Traveling the world, he waged an armor war to find and eradicate the stolen technology, but with such savagery that he was branded an international outlaw and temporarily expelled from the Avengers. Inheriting the quantum bands worn for billions of years by a series of cosmic champions appointed by Eon, including the Marvel Boy of the 1950s, S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Wendell Vaughn, known as Quasar, was the next to serve as protector of the universe. In the aftermath of the mutant massacre, Captain Britain, Megan Pusano, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, and Rachel Summers formed Excalibur to honor the legacy of the X-Men. Earth's heroes and mutants assembled on multiple fronts to repel a demonic invasion of Earth, with a heroic but corrupt magic and the villainous Jean Grey clone, Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, at the forefront of the battle. Johnny Blaze, meanwhile, dealt with a different demon, his own. After separating himself from Zarathos, Blaze was finally free from being the Ghost Rider, only to see his brother Danny Ketch become the next spirit of vengeance when he was bonded with the essence of their ancestor, Noble Kale, another former rider. For a time, the brothers joined forces with Doctor Strange, Morbius the Living Vampire, and others as the loose-knit Midnight Suns. To compensate for his slain family, young crime fighter Night Thrasher created his own teenage team called the New Warriors, bringing together Nova, Firestar, Namorita, Speedball, and a new Marvel Boy. Raised in a grim future ruled by Apocalypse, Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, traveled back in time to prevent the rise of Apocalypse's reign. Under the name Cable, Summers took command of the New Mutants and transformed them into a paramilitary squad called X-Force. Like Wolverine, an unidentified man going by the name Wade Wilson was a refugee from the Weapon X program. As Deadpool, a disfigured mercenary with a superhuman healing factor and physical prowess, Wilson's joking demeanor often belied his deadly skills. Having been gathered from across the cosmos, the Infinity Gems proved the greatest threat yet to reality. To impress his beloved Death, Thanos embedded them into the Infinity Gauntlet, giving him the ability to eradicate half of all life in the universe with a snap of his fingers. Only once the gauntlet was stolen by the space pirate Nebula was the universe restored. Its gems were taken into the custody of Adam Warlock and his hand-picked Infinity Watch for their protection. Soon after, however, Warlock's evil counterpart, the Magus, faced Earth's defenders in an attempt to restore the gauntlet. Had Warlock not secretly replaced one of the stones with a non-powered replica, the resultant conflict would have destroyed them all. Despite every attempt to keep them apart, the gems would continue to accumulate from time to time in the hands of heroes and madmen alike. With Earth imperiled, the Avengers were drawn into a galactic war between the Kree and the Shi'ar empires. During the struggle, the Kree's supreme intelligence, in an attempt to force evolution within his race, brought about the detonation of the Negabomb, which destroyed 98% of the Empire's 500 billion citizens. With the Supreme Intelligence subsequently believed executed, the Shi'ar Imperium absorbed the remaining Kree territories. Strife, an embittered clone of Cable, came from the future to form a terrorist group called the Mutant Liberation Front. Not long after, Strife and Apocalypse declared war upon one another, with Earth's mutants caught in the middle. Ultimately defeated, Strife nevertheless managed to unleash his greatest weapon, the mutant plague known as the Legacy Virus. An offspring of the Venom symbiote bonded with a sociopathic serial killer named Cletus Cassidy to become Carnage. Cassidy subsequently led a band of similarly mentally unbalanced superhumans on a killing spree throughout New York City. As the death toll mounted, Spider-Man and his allies were forced to team with Venom in order to defeat and incarcerate Carnage, though not without severely testing Spider-Man's vow to never take a life. After many years of complex and unsteady romance, sweetheart Cyclops and Jean Grey finally wed. Desperate to annihilate his arch-nemesis once and for all, Norman Osborn secretly orchestrated the return of the Spider-Man clone created by the Jackal. He manipulated Peter Parker, the Jackal, and the clone, who took the name Ben Reilly, alias the Scarlet Spider, into believing Parker was the clone and Reilly the original. Only after Parker's life was turned upside down and Reilly claimed the Spider-Man name were Osborn's long-term machinations uncovered. Parker and Reilly confronted Osborn, but during the battle, the true clone was revealed when Reilly was killed and crumbled to dust. Newer mutants were emerging, some destined to raise their world to new heights, others to ruin it. Of the former, none were more notable than Generation X. To train these teenage newcomers, the Irish mutant Banshee and Emma Frost, former White Queen of the Hellfire Club, established a remote branch of Charles Xavier's school in Massachusetts. Conversely, David Haller, Xavier's son, single-handedly transformed the Earth, traveling back in time. He intended to slay Xavier's greatest enemy, Magneto, but instead accidentally killed his father. The resultant change in history created a dark reality in which Apocalypse ruled the Earth with mercy toward none. A mutant resistance squad using a fragment of the M'Kraan crystal was able to restore the proper timeline only by sending the mutant bishop into the past to undo Haller's actions. Xavier was also at the center of another challenge to face Earth, An unintended psychic merging of Xavier's long-repressed negative feelings with Magneto's dark ego resulted in the creation of the all-powerful Onslaught, a being of pure psychic energy who wanted to bring about the end of independent thought by bonding all humanity into a single collective intelligence. Among those who defeated him were the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, who seemed to perish in the ensuing battle. Instead, they were cast into a pocket universe, onto a parallel Earth where they were reborn into new lives that were similar but not identical to their previous incarnations. A year later, they were retrieved and restored only through the intervention of the creator of that parallel world, a young child, Franklin Richards.
That's us. Franklin Richards and Galactus. The World Builder and the World Destroyer.
So powerful had you become that the Celestials took direct notice.
They wouldn't say, but I always suspected that was out of jealousy. They demanded I destroy my little pocket world. Petulant babies. I taught them a little human perspective, and they backed off once I brought everybody home.
Whether envious or not, they knew the truth. Your power to create realities was boundless.
And, to be fair, sporadic. What's wrong?
Nothing. To continue. In the absence of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, a new team had emerged. The Thunderbolts gained the admiration of a world unaware that they were, in fact, villains posing as heroes. Led by Baron Zemo posing as Citizen V, several of them ended up rejecting, over time, their opportunistic ways in attempts to redeem themselves. Earth's mutant population had exploded. To the north of Madagascar, the island of Genosha became home to over 16 million Homo superior until Cassandra Nova, Charles Xavier's twin sister, used rogue sentinels to eradicate them in an act of unrepentant genocide. In the aftermath, Xavier refused to keep his students in hiding any longer and took proactive public steps to improve human-mutant relations. While Cyclops and Emma Frost became co-headmasters of the Xavier Institute, Xavier and Magneto began rebuilding Genosha together. In America, two long-retired heroes found new life. One, Robert Reynolds, active years before thanks to an attempt to recreate the super soldier formula, awoke from an amnesiac state and reclaimed his identity as the Sentry. His photosynthetic powers were virtually limitless, held in check only by the mental blocks of his various psychological illnesses. The other, Jessica Jones, had been exposed to radioactive chemicals as a teenager, gaining powers including superhuman strength and durability. For a short time, she operated under the codename Jewel, until she was traumatized by an encounter with the mind-controlling Purple Man. Leaving Jewel behind, Private Detective Jones opened Alias Investigations. Under the guidance of a wealthy entrepreneur, X-Force evolved into X-Statics and quickly became media superstars. Meanwhile, another team of young heroes was forced down a far different path when they discovered their parents were the criminal organization The Pride. Fleeing their heritage to chart their own destiny, they became runaways. Besieged by deadly attacks, their headquarters demolished and their ranks winnowed, the Avengers were nearly destroyed by a mystery opponent. Ultimately, their foe stood revealed as one of their own, Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, who had been driven slowly insane by the discovery that her beloved twin infants were no more than empty constructs her own subconscious had created. As a result of the Scarlet Witch's attacks, the Avengers disbanded for a time, reuniting in the interim as a new, looser-knit team. They would eventually rebuild their organization, but only after a crisis that would pit them against one another with a ferocity they had never before experienced. Even under the watchful eyes of Magneto and Charles Xavier, Wanda's powers continue to become more volatile. Quicksilver, fearful that his sister might be executed for her crimes, manipulated her into transforming global reality into one in which humans were ruled by mutants, in turn led by Magneto's royal house of M. Finding this existence no safer than the one she'd abandoned, the Scarlet Witch reverted reality with one alteration: the near eradication of mutant powers worldwide, reducing the mutant population from millions to mere hundreds. A confrontation with James Barnes, the Winter Soldier, gave Captain America the opportunity to restore his former partner's lost memories in true personality using the Cosmic Cube. Overcome with remorse, Barnes attempted to pay for past sins by becoming a deep-cover operative for Nick Fury. The Illuminati, having decided that an increasingly rageful Hulk was too dangerous to remain on Earth, exiled the Beast into space. Though they had intended for him to arrive on a peaceful world, a freak accident caused the Hulk to instead crash onto the gladiatorial planet Sakaar. A battle between the New Warriors and Nitro accidentally resulted in the deaths of hundreds of civilian bystanders, giving America's politicians the public support required to pass the Superhuman Registration Act. Earth's heroes were sharply divided by new laws, requiring them to be monitored and trained, and to surrender their real names to their government. Iron Man felt the act was reasonable and inevitable. Captain America, however, refused to advocate for the surrender of liberty, leading to a failed attempt by S.H.I.E.L.D. to incarcerate him. Iron Man gathered pro-registration heroes such as She-Hulk, Mr. Fantastic, and Ms. Marvel to enforce the act. In rebellion, Captain America led a small team of like-minded superhumans, the Secret Avengers, in an attempt to subvert the new laws. The resultant civil war eventually erupted onto the streets of New York City before Captain America, realizing how much danger the battle was causing to the innocents he'd sworn to protect, surrendered the fight. While many of the Secret Avengers were given governmental amnesty, the captain was taken into custody for his crimes. Although some held the captain in disgrace, his nation nevertheless fell into mourning after the machinations of the Red Skull brought about his assassination. Two men were instrumental in bringing the Skull to justice and maintaining Rogers' dreams for America. One, Sam Wilson, had partnered with Rogers during a prior conflict with the Skull, assuming the costumed identity of the Falcon. Telepathically linked with his bird of prey, Redwing, Wilson divided his time between defending the Earth as an Avenger and protecting his neighborhood in Harlem, New York. The other, the Winter Soldier, honored Rogers' final request by adopting the role of Captain America and continuing his legacy. On Sakaar, the Hulk eventually ascended to the planetary throne and took a wife, only to watch his new world die when the spaceship in which he had arrived exploded in a freak accident. Hulk mistakenly blamed the Illuminati for the explosion and its aftermath, and swore revenge. Alongside his team of super-powered gladiators, the Warbound, he returned to Earth. There, he destroyed Avengers Tower, defeated and subjugated Iron Man, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, and others, and claimed rule over New York City. Only after the Hulk turned his wrath towards Miek, the Warbound actually responsible for Sakaar's destruction, was Iron Man able to nullify enough of the Beast's gamma radiation to defeat him, rendering him comatose. Trillions of miles away, Annihilus's annihilation wave obliterated the Skrull homeworld. Subsequently, the techno-organic Phalanx race similarly ravaged the Kree Empire. Among the noteworthy heroes who helped repel the Phalanx was Peter Quill, alias Star-Lord, a young half-Earthling, half-Spartoid who had traveled into space to seek his birthright. Following the rout of the Phalanx, Quill assembled an interplanetary crew to serve as the Guardians of the Galaxy. Its members included a gifted mechanic named Rocket Raccoon, Groot, a Flora Colossi from Planet X, whose language was understood only by Rocket, Drax the Destroyer, a fighter with superhuman strength, Gamora, the adopted daughter of Thanos, and for a brief time, Phyla Vel, then the most recent warrior to hold the title of Quasar. The Skrulls, their civilization shattered and in need of a new homeworld, set their sights on Earth. Their invasion began with the activation of numerous sleeper agents, Skrulls who long ago had secretly replaced Earthlings such as Hank Pym and Elektra. Paranoia reigned as the invasion continued, with no one certain who among them was an ally and who was a shapeshifter, until Reed Richards managed to create a Skrull detector. The Skrulls were forced to retreat, but not before Norman Osborn became an international hero by murdering the Skrull Queen. Osborn, ever scheming, quickly took full advantage of his new prestige. He accepted the leadership of Hammer, an international espionage agency that briefly replaced S.H.I.E.L.D., and surrounded himself with similarly corrupt associates in order to bend governments to his will. As the Iron Patriot, he founded his own Avengers and X-Men teams, comprising disguised villains, while those heroes who opposed to his activities were branded as fugitives from the law. In the interim, the actual X-Men embarked on a quest to save the first mutant child born following the near extinction of their race, a mutant messiah who would be named Hope Summers. The rescue effort pitted them against the Purifiers, religious zealots dedicated to the annihilation of mutants, a series of beast-designed Predator X, and longtime ally Bishop, a refugee from an alternate future in which mutants were branded and incarcerated. Two key teammates of the X-Men during this period were Gambit, manipulator of kinetic energy, and Rogue, whose touch absorbed others' abilities and memories. Bishop wrongly believed Hope's existence would lead to his own dystopian timeline, and accidentally shot Professor Xavier in an attempt to end Hope's life. In desperation, targeted by Osborn's machinations, the X-Men relocated to their own autocratic island nation of Utopia, off the coast of California, where they would be temporarily safe from persecution. As Osborn's malice intensified, fate provided a champion to a nation in need. Though Steve Rogers' body was believed buried, his consciousness was instead tumbling through time, eventually reuniting with his corporeal form. Under Rogers' leadership, Earth's superhumans rallied against Osborn. Osborn's ultimate undoing was the result of his own hubris, as he tried and failed to conquer Asgard. In the aftermath of Osborn's defeat, Steve Rogers accepted the position of Commander of America's National Security, under the condition that the Superhuman Registration Act would finally be repealed. With Osborn gone, Commander Rogers ushered in a post-registration heroic age, assembling a new team of Avengers and serving as the executive director of a rebuilt S.H.I.E.L.D. for a short time before reclaiming his Captain America identity. Ms. Marvel shed her previous costumed identity to become the new Captain Marvel. Under S.H.I.E.L.D. Aegis, several of its agents formed a Black Ops Secret Avengers unit, among them Marcus Johnson, who took his father's name, Nick Fury, former director Maria Hill, strategist Phil Coulson, and super spy Sharon Carter. A localized phenomenon of involuntary power transformed Manhattan into Spider Island, when the Jackal and his benefactor, the Spider Queen, unleashed a virus that duplicated Spider-Man's powers in hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens, creating chaos. The Queen's ambition to create a new arachnid-based splinter of humanity was quelled by Spider-Man with the aid of Reed Richards, Horizon Labs, and Kane, a Peter Parker clone who called himself the Scarlet Spider. The mutants' utopia proved anything but. Escalating disagreements led to a schism in the X-Men's ranks, with half the team returning to America. The mutant divide, however, was relatively short-lived, as the X-Men were forced to pit themselves against Earth's mightiest heroes. When the Avengers learned that the Phoenix Force was returning to Earth, they intended to repel it. This caused them to come to blows with the X-Men, who believed the Force could be used to rejuvenate the mutant race. During the subsequent battles, Hope Summers fought to become the Phoenix Force's host, but the Avengers accidentally splintered the Force into 5 parts that inhabited Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Colossus, and Magic. Ultimately, Cyclops drained the others' Force powers to become a tyrannical, Dark Phoenix. This allowed the Scarlet Witch and Hope to purge the Phoenix Force from his body and use it to restore the mutant population. Cyclops, a changed and bitter man following his brush with the Phoenix Force, began a savage crusade against mutant persecution that nearly escalated into a mutant civil war. Desperate to remind Cyclops of the rational soul he'd once been, the Beast reached into the time stream and brought forth far younger, more hopeful and idealistic versions of the original 5 X-Men to set an example for Cyclops. Despite their unfamiliar surroundings, they undertook several successful missions before returning to their own era, their memories of their future wiped. Around that time, the Avengers embarked on a time travel mission of their own to save Earth from domination by the ever-evolving Ultron, a cybernetic being of pure malevolence created by Hank Pym. I am losing cohesion. The end, the beginning, is nearly upon us. Prepare yourself.
I'm not ready to let go. I can buy time, create something new.
From what? Even you require building blocks. There are none left. You come from a legendary family of explorers, Franklin Richards. You were born to face the unknown. Embrace your fate. In the meantime, I shall continue, while I am still able. When the Avengers departed Earth to face the Builders, an ancient and powerful race of galactic enslavers, Thanos and his Black Order took advantage of their absence to attack the planet. Thanos' objective was to seek out and destroy his son, Thane, progeny of the Mad Titan and an inhuman woman whose very presence brought death. Thanos was unaware that the returning Avengers had liberated entire armies from the Builders' control, armies now united in their goal of toppling Thanos, whom Thane subsequently imprisoned in a coffin of amber. During this period, Thanos destroyed the city of Atalan. As a result, its Terrigen mist spread across the world, mutating anyone whose ancestors had mated with Inhumans and thus carried a recessive Inhuman gene. The most notable Terrigenesis turned Pakistani-American teenager Kamala Khan into the size and shape-changing Ms. Marvel. Nick Fury, in his secret role as the Man on the Wall, confronted Uatu to demand the names of those who had plundered the Watcher's arsenal. Uatu's vow of non-interference, however, bound him to secrecy, despite the imminent peril to Earth presented by the missing weapons. With countless lives in danger and believing himself to have no other option, Fury did the unthinkable. He murdered Uatu and took his eye, which contained the sum of the Watcher's vast knowledge. Aware he had faced retribution by Earth's heroes for his act of homicide, regardless of its motive, Fury distracted them by pretending to lead the murder investigation himself, until the Arsenal's thieves, Dr. Midas, and the Orb could be identified and apprehended. Once the Avengers began to suspect they had been deceived, their moonside confrontation with Fury took an especially heavy toll on Thor. Escaping the Avengers, Fury goaded Midas into destroying himself in a blast that seemed to claim Fury as well. His former friends were unaware that Fury had instead absorbed Uatu's powers and become the new Watcher of the Earth, the Unseen. During battle, Fury had defeated Thor merely by whispering 3 words: "Gore was right." It was a reference to one of Thor's greatest enemies, a foe who had insisted that no god, including the Asgardians and Thor himself, was as worthy of veneration and power as they had believed themselves to be. Poisoned by doubt, Thor found himself unable to lift Mjolnir. Instead, the hammer was claimed by Dr. Jane Foster, one of Thor's earliest Midgardian friends. Thor had been healthy, Jane was not. Her body was ravaged by cancer, and each transformation into the new Thor shortened her mortal life. Another hero similarly passed his mantle, though under brighter circumstances. During a battle with the Iron Nail, the super soldier serum within Steve Rogers' body was neutralized, causing him to age rapidly. Physically unable to maintain his battlefield prowess, Rogers appointed Sam Wilson, formerly Rogers' partner the Falcon, as his replacement. For a time, Spider-Man's consciousness was replaced by that of his foe, Dr. Otto Octavius, otherwise known as Dr. Octopus. Rather than use his new identity for villainy, Octavius, ever arrogant, strove to prove that he was worthier of Spider-Man's abilities, a superior Spider-Man. Though the transposition was eventually reversed, Octavius lived on in a body cloned from a hybrid of Parker's DNA and his own. Psychic vampire Morlun and his family, the Inheritors, began a killing spree that encompassed the entire multiverse. Their goal was to slaughter every alternate universe counterpart to Spider-Man and feed upon the totemistic forces that Morlun claimed gave them their powers. Instead, Spider-Man took the fight to the enemy, backed by an army of parallel world counterparts. Their initial battle ended with Morlun and the Inheritors exiled to a barren alternate Earth, void of life. The multiverse had started to collapse. Entire universes collided, annihilating one another in incursion events, until there were but 2 left, yours and one alternate. Your father and his friends made every effort to save their kind as these 2 remaining universes impacted, yet only a small group escaped the cataclysm in 2 life crafts, one from each reality, both ultimately reaching Battleworld. Battleworld was existence's sole surviving planet, created when Victor Von Doom used the Molecule Man to steal the infinite power of the Beyonders. With the Molecule Man acting as Doom's battery, the all-powerful Doom populated the world with kingdoms forged from the fractured remnants of the realities destroyed by the incursions. Unsurprisingly, he appointed himself its unquestioned God King. Other than Doom, your father's group of survivors and their counterparts, led by a dark version of Richards known as Maker, were the only beings who remembered their past existence. All others under Doom's rule had no memory of a life beforehand. Working together, both groups slowly built a resistance army, but their efforts at rebellion gained no purchase until Spider-Man and his counterpart discovered the Molecule Man, still teeming with the Beyonders' power. Ultimately, it was the Molecule Man who gave your father victory. Confronted with the truth that Doom had used the gift of infinite power in such a petty and venal manner, Molecule Man transferred it to Richards, who then used it to restore the universe he knew, which would now be home to the Maker and Spider-Man's counterpart as well. With the aid of you and your sister, Valeria, Richards and his future foundation began rebuilding lost realities and constructing new ones on a journey that spanned the breadth of time and existence. In this restored universe, a new generation of champions walked the earth. Korean-American genius Amadeus Cho, during a short period in which Bruce Banner was believed dead, carried the name and the might of the Hulk, until later adopting the name Brawn. Cho's friend Cindy Moon had been bitten by the same spider that gave Peter Parker his powers. She used hers under the codename Silk. Ghost Spider came from an alternate timeline in which Peter Parker's spider bite happened to Gwen Stacy instead. Unlike Parker, she traveled the multiverse frequently. Another hero not native to your universe was Gwenpool, or Gwenpool. Bitten by a mutated spider, high schooler Miles Morales developed abilities similar to those of Peter Parker. As a second Spider-Man, Morales defended New York with the additional aid of a paralyzing venom blast and near invisibility. Sam Alexander, like his father before him, was an Earthling enlisted in the Interstellar Nova Corps as a Protector Nova. Riri Williams, a brilliant young engineering student, amazed Iron Man by constructing armor to emulate and rival his own. She called herself Iron Heart. Laura Kinney, a young female clone of Wolverine, was successfully created following her maker's 22 failed attempts, thus codenamed X-23. For a time, she stepped into Wolverine's shoes. Viv Vision was a synthezoid created by the Vision to be his daughter. Like him, possessing the powers of density manipulation, solar radiation absorption, and holographic projection and camouflage. Nadia Van Dyne recreated the technology of her father, Hank Pym, to become the Wasp, agent of GIRL, Genius in Action Research Labs. Thanks to Terrigenesis, Lunella Lafayette, or Moon Girl, already the smartest human alive, could swap minds with her constant companion, a refugee from an alternate universe known as Devil Dinosaur. Meanwhile, the Terrigen mists continued to spread across the planet. Though the mists were critical to creating future generations of Inhumans, they proved toxic to mutants and threatened to render Earth uninhabitable for them. With no time for negotiation, the conflict between the two races erupted in a brutal war that ended only after both sides realized that the conflict had been triggered by a mentally imbalanced Emma Frost. Once Medusa learned what was at stake for the mutants, she destroyed the Terrigen on her own, purposefully endangering the future of her people so that the mutants would live. The United States was never closer to annihilation from within than it was when a clone of the Red Skull used a cosmic cube to rewrite history, creating an alternate Captain America loyal only to Hydra. Thus, Steve Rogers launched a successful conquest of America, appointing himself the supreme leader of the country, transforming it into a Hydra nation. Fortunately, the true Rogers, existing by then only as a memory within a fragment of the cube, re-emerged once that fragment was reunited with the whole. Captain America then led Earth's heroes to overthrow Hydra, restoring liberty and justice where there had been only tyranny and corruption. The Avengers united against Loki, the Horde and the final host, dark Celestials infected by the Horde who had slain all the living Celestials. Humanity's only salvation lay in the Avengers' mad gambit to form a Unimind, with which they rendered the Horde dormant and revived the Celestials to fight by their side. To reward the Avengers, the Celestials unearthed the corpse of the long-forgotten progenitor Celestial to serve as the team's new towering mountain headquarters. After years spent exploring the edges of existence, your reality-warping powers became temporarily depleted, and you and your family returned home. Malekith the Accursed, ruler of the Dark Elves of Svartalfheim, waged a war of the realms, marching his army across the 10 realms and conquering 9 before descending upon the last, yours, Midgard. Allied with the frost giants, the fire goblins, Ulik, and his rock trolls, Curse, Minotaur, the Enchantress, and many others, Malekith was opposed by perhaps the greatest assemblage thus far of Earth's heroes, and vanquished by Thor and his Thor Corps, a team of alternate version thunder gods from throughout space-time. As peace was celebrated throughout the realms, Odin proudly surrendered his throne to his son, declaring Thor to be Asgard's new All-Father. During the battle, Jane Foster had been using a parallel universe version of the Hammer Mjolnir. Once the war was won, it reformed itself into the underyarn of the All-Weapon, a golden vambrace on her arm, capable of transforming into any weapon or tool Foster could imagine. Astride her winged horse, Pegasus, she became Valkyrie, Angel of Asgard. Professor Xavier and Magneto at long last forged the peaceful partnership that had always eluded them. With the assistance of Moira McTaggart, they turned the living island of Krakoa into a nation-state home for all mutants, regardless of their past allegiances, forcing the X-Men to live in harmony under strict governance alongside some of their greatest past foes. It was a new golden age for the Homo Superior race. Krakoa maintained international alliances by trading life-benefiting drugs to those countries that recognized the nation-state's independence, all under the watchful eye of the Krakoan government, the Quiet Council. Most impressively, Xavier, donning a new Cerebro helmet, perfected an elaborate ceremony by which all mutants could be resurrected from the grave when need be. The Age of Khonshu. The interstellar reign of the half-breed. The rise of the outlawed generation. The King in Black. The wedding of Tony Stark and Emma Frost. The tragic fate of Luke Cage and Jessica Jones's second child. The Defenders of Tomorrow. Threadneedle. Warbird. The fate of Mephisto.
Whoa, stay with me. Focus.
I recall the era of corrupt mega-corporations and the Great Purge of Heroes. A time when these global entities used Sentinels as their weapon, only for those same Sentinels to turn back upon them, seizing control of the United States until the few mutants surviving were able to topple them. Undeterred, these corporations expanded their global control, using tools such as the cyborg soldiers known as Deathlocks. Replacing governments, these organizations consolidated wealth and power into a small upper class, leaving most humans to live as slaves, defended by the Spider-Man of 2099 and others. Rebels such as Machine Man were forced to scavenge technology just to survive. I have fragmented memories of rebels and despots. Without the legions of heroes it once had, the weakened Earth proved vulnerable to conquest and rule by beings from Mars, under the leadership of the rebel Killraven. The alien subjugators were repelled, leading to a short-lived peacetime, ended by a nuclear war during which the Hulk absorbed unimaginable levels of radiation. I no longer remember what caused the conflict, only that it afforded dominance to a cruel and twisted fragment of the Hulk's personality known as the Maestro. As the Maestro, Hulk seized control of this ruined world and ruled from his capital city of Dystopia for 100 years before his death. By the 30th century, genetically engineered subspecies of humanity, each designed to thrive in unique conditions, colonized Mercury, Jupiter, and Pluto. But the outreach was not enough to prevent the solar system from being enslaved by the war-hungry Badoon. This time, Earth found its defenders in the Guardians of the Galaxy: Vance Astro, Charlie 27, Yondu, Montanex, Starhawk, and Nikki. Once the Badoon were defeated, 31st century Earth became a utopia bereft of conflict, although one bored soul, Nathaniel Richards, craved challenge and adversity, and set out to establish kingdoms throughout time and space as Kang the Conqueror. 2,000 years after the Age of Heroes, Earth withstood attempt after attempt, all in vain, to challenge its prosperity and freedoms. Nothing could destroy it, not even the return of Apocalypse. No matter the challenge your world endured, its citizens proclaiming then and forever as one, Earth shall not yield. And it never did. I am sorry. I wish that I could call forth more for you, but...
But it's time. I know. Come with me.
Such is not the purpose of Galactus. Please understand, I transitioned from the previous multiverse to this one only because I was a passenger to the energy that created it. This time, I am that energy. You are my passenger. But even in rebirth, you will not forget this, I promise. You will remember a cosmos full of beings who strove with every moment, every breath, to bring light and hope to its darkest corners. Regardless of their origins, regardless of the mark they left, large or small, each one understood the single truth that defined their universe. That with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Let their lives, their adventures, their triumphs inspire you all the rest of your days. Together, they brought about a thing of wonder, a universe of marvels.